Welcome back, everybody. I hope you've been having a great time. As you know, I hurt my back the last few days, so I thought it would be great to talk about this topic during the week, and especially today. I reached out for another friend and colleague of mine, a brilliant Suzuki teacher from south of London, Kimberly Wong, and she knows this really well because she's had a few injuries in the past. So I'd like to introduce you to her. So welcome and thank you, Kimberly, for being part of this madness of 100 days practice. Thank you for agreeing on doing the talk with me this week. I think they've heard enough of me, so they probably want to hear someone else talking this time.
I haven't heard enough of you yet.
So I thought it would be great to have a conversation today, especially because we got something in common apart from our love for music and teaching. As you know, I had a little back problem this week, which is still kind of there. It's getting better, and I know that you have had a lot of experience with back problems and shoulder problems and all sorts of injuries in the past and even now. So I thought it would be great if we get a little bit of your intake on this. So
Thank you so much for inviting me, first of all. I'm really excited to be talking with you. I have had a lot of problems with my back in the past and now, actually. We don't really know what the problem is at the moment, but I'm unable to play. And this actually happened to me once more about 14 years ago when I was at music college. I was in a car crash where I was in the back seat of the car and a car came into the back of us. And we thought everything was, the car was totaled, but everyone got out just fine. We were just thanking our lucky stars that everyone was okay. But it turned out I had really bad whiplash, and then I was given the wrong treatment for about 6 months, in which time my spine went into an S shape and I was really in pain. And I had to take a bit of time off music college and I was told not to play the violin. And it was really difficult. And I actually spent maybe a year where on and off I wasn't allowed to play the violin for long stretches of time. So even though I can't play at the moment, I feel a bit more prepared than I did when I was 19 and felt like it was just not possible. I didn't know how I was going to get along. But I had amazing teachers at the Royal Northern, and quite a few of them gave me just such valuable advice. So I would love to go through that, and I'm sure that you have had lots of really great intake as well. So I'm really looking forward to picking your brain as well.
Great. Yes, I think that's really, really good. So I'm interested if you could tell me what kind of things were you able to do or you're able to do now when you're not able to play your instrument? Because
I think the first thing that's really important, particularly for those of us who know how to utilize this skill through the Suzuki method, is the listening. Definitely really listening to music more than normal. At least 10 times more than normal. Just have it going on in the background, because you do so much learning that way. But I always remember this story that stuck in my mind. I don't actually know if it's true, but I certainly took a lot from it and feel that when I look at my music without the violin and I really think about it the right way, that it really helps. So I heard this story that a Russian classical violinist was banished by the government to some very icy place, I think in Serbia or something like that, where he couldn't take his violin, he couldn't take his hands out of his gloves because he would have had frostbite almost immediately. So what he did was he took a concerto with him that was supposed to be really, really difficult to play, and he'd never tried it before. And he spent a year wrapped up in his coat and his furs, looking at his music and practicing it in his brain, picking out all the same practice spots that we would do if you had the violin, thinking about it, moving his fingers inside his gloves, really, really getting to know all the intervals and the finger patterns and hearing it inside his head and thinking about how he wanted to play it, not just learning the music, but also thinking musically about how stylistically he would like to play it. And when he got back to his instrument a year later, it was pretty much 90% there. He could pretty much do it. So, and that always really stuck with me and gave me quite a lot of hope around a time when I felt like I was falling behind my peers, I was never going to be able to graduate. And I really highly recommend it. So listen to Guillaume's Day 42, but also get your music out. If you're away, say you're away on holiday or you're on a school trip for a few days, I've definitely had students do this. Take a photograph or a photocopy of the part of the music that they really need to learn, even just the couple of practice boxes, and really sit there and think through the fingers, listen. They'll take, if they have a phone or an MP3 player, they'll take the music and listen along. Otherwise, they'll just sing it along in their head. They'll think through the fingers. They'll think through, is it a wide space or a close space? And they'll really be thinking about just keeping everything going in the mind. And I really think that that's one way that's really fantastic. I wanted to ask you, Guillaume, before we get to that point of, problems with the body, are there any ways that you can tell us about preventing it? What do you think?
Yeah, of course. You cannot prevent a car accident, but if we're talking about injuries, I think that's a very important thing to talk about, because we don't want to get to the point where we cannot play the instrument. So I think one of the main things I always tell my students is to keep a good posture. And it's not just for the concert, and it's not just for the lesson, it's for the practice at home. Keeping a good posture when they're at home instead of just sitting down and just playing really badly. Keeping a really good alignment. So we're talking about things I learned from my Alexander technique lessons I had, and also from lots of yoga I've been doing during the years. The alignment is one of the most important things. For example, keeping your head, the back of your head really tall all the time, shoulders down. And that is for any instrument, it's not just for the violin. Any instrument you're sitting down, you're going to be thinking of the same. Shoulders down, relaxed, and keeping really, really tall head. Keeping also your shoulders and back wide instead of crunching it together. And also just keep checking while you practice. There's many people, when you're practicing, they put the instrument up and they start doing all these funny habits. And those habits happen because of the way they practice. The practice is what's going to give you the habit, because you're doing it every day. So if you keep a good habit of having a good posture, that habit is going to stay with you all the time. And you're going to make sure that you have a good alignment when you practice. So with the violin, for example, we want to make sure that we keep this tall head. Even when we put the violin and the head on the violin, it's not that we want to crunch up after that. We want to keep it tall all the way through. Practicing with a good posture, with the feet open, relaxed, you might be practicing, and in the middle of it, you might not realize, but you are creating tension in your shoulders, creating tension in your wrists or in your fingers. So every so often, just stop, breathe. And by doing that, you're releasing those tensions around your body. By doing that every so often and taking a rest, putting the instrument down, having a few stretches, that will make a big difference. And apart from the practice, the other thing, and I know you do it as well, Kimberly, is exercising and stretching, away from the instrument. Making sure that you keep also a good diet, making sure that you keep healthy throughout the day. It's not just, okay, now it's practice, now I have to think about the alignment. No, all the time. We need to make sure that you have a good posture, make sure that you keep having a regular, healthy lifestyle with exercise. And
definitely. And I think, actually having targeted exercises that help you to strengthen your shoulders and your lats in your back, I think really do help me to prevent. You can also do exercises for your hands to keep them strong. So right now I can't play loads of scales and lots of etudes to keep my fingers strong, but I can keep them strong. So you can create a little mini gym. I don't know if you have a hair tie, Guillaume, but you could do it with me.
Okay, I don't have one.
So the first one is you want to strengthen the tendons on the insides, because you don't really have muscles inside your fingers. It's the tendons that are attached, right? So you want to strengthen the tendons. So the first one is, I call this the duck. Okay, so if you do it without, you want to stick your 3 fingers together at the top, and you want to open and close the mouth of the duck. And so if you pop your hair tie on top, I'm going to move it so that you can see, then you can create how much pressure you want. Okay, so you're going to see if you pull quite hard, you actually can't really pull these together, but you can change the pressure so that it's just creating a little bit of resistance, and then as your finger gets stronger, you can add a bit more resistance with your finger. And you want to do it this way as well. You want to put it quite towards the tip here, and this one is like bicep curls. You want to curl up. You really want less resistance there. You can wrap it around your finger a little bit as well. That sometimes helps. And then you can do the same thing with your 3rd finger as well. You can do the same thing with your 3rd finger. I try to get my little finger out of the way so that it's not using the little finger to push up. Does that make sense? So I try to get the little finger out of the way. So those are some useful exercises, and I like to do them on both hands because, as we know,
Both hands. Yeah, I was going to ask you.
Yeah, because you want your little finger to be nice and strong on that hand. But then obviously you can do loads of exercises with I love all the book 4 exercises that we do with the students for those flexible fingers.
Yes.
What about you? Do you have any strengthening exercises for your fingers?
More than strengthening, I mean, you've been talking about that, but it's also about making sure that they're nice and loose. So that's something that we can talk about even from the very beginning, beginners as well. Making sure that the fingers in the right hand for the bow, for example, that they're nice and soft. We don't create tension there. So we want to make sure that they're nice and soft, and we just by lifting one or the other every so often, or well, in the middle of playing we stop and then we just tap them, see how they are, and then do it again. For beginners, I think that's really, really important. I think you probably know this really well as well. The spider game, going up and down.
Yes, I love the spider game.
For the beginners, it's really good, and it's actually also strengthening because on the way up, you need to use the muscles of the hand to go up.
Coming down, you have to use that little finger, and it's so tough.
That's right.
Tough.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, also any of those kind of pushing up with the pinky. That's actually quite hard, especially for little hands. So I would do lots of those as well to make sure that we are actually using it the right way, and we understand the purpose of it. So that is something for beginners. I think is really, really good. Like you said as well, any of those for more advanced players.
I love to do that stuff where you draw on a notebook and come up with I don't know, this is my tree.
Yes,
right. Although one stretch that's really good for all violinists, because obviously we're up here and this gets really solid, and then you're coming across. So this is for me, my left front shoulder is usually more sore than my right, but is that I know there's one that's good for everyone, which is you make a W with your arms, and then you make thumbs up, and then you point them behind you as far as you can go, and you can feel the stretch in the front of your shoulders, and that's just really good for all violinists, really. And you should hold that for about 10 seconds, and you should try to do that a few times during the day. It feels good, doesn't it?
Yes, it's a good stretch.
Yeah, because you with the violin everything comes forward so much that this is just really good to stretch out those. What do you feel about when if you say you've sprained your arm, or you have tendonitis in one hand or something, and you can play your instrument, but you can only do it with one arm? What are your thoughts on there? Because that happens, doesn't it?
It does, yes. Well, it depends on which arm it is, but if it's if it's the right arm that you can use, it also depends whether you can hold the violin up or not. So for example, these last few days I couldn't actually hold it that well. So like you said, all these exercises, or imagining you got the instrument there, and just making the motions that you would normally do, loads and loads of finger action, making sure that everything is nice and soft. Imagining you getting, you playing and making a nice tone on the instrument without having the instrument there. So those things can be quite useful. Have you got any others for the right hand?
I think I was going to say pretty much the same as you. I think one of the major things is making sure that you can still play straight bows. I mean, I think once you hit a certain point, maybe grade 6 or 7, by that point hopefully you can play straight bows and you don't need to think too hard about it. But even up until that point, most of us are still growing until that point, and your arm is getting longer every time, and I like to put a cloth or a tissue on my shoulder, if I can't lift the violin up, I think putting a cloth or a tissue there, and that happens to me sometimes where I can't put the violin on my shoulder, and then practice straight bows in the mirror, and then the rosin is going onto the cloth. So
I mean, if the problem is actually if it's something like tendinitis, you can still put your violin up, and if that's the case, then there's a lot more we can do. You were saying about straight bows, which is very good. There's an exercise I had from years ago, which is trying to keep the bow kind of off the string and keeping it straight as slow as possible, and that's really hard even now for me.
I like this one.
All the way to the top. If that's too hard, I mean also backwards, all the way up. The other way is also just playing at the tip and then just playing at the bottom. And having that control of the arm.
That's really cool.
Those are really useful because you actually have to do the same motion without actually sounding. Then you can go into straight bows after that. That can be quite useful.
I think I'm definitely going to try that one. I really like that. I think one of the hard things when you can only play with one hand is that it can feel quite boring because you can't hear anything. So I like to make a little game out of it. I think you can play 4 bows. Depends on the stroke that you're working on, but usually for my students, if it's the first time that they've had this problem, we'll just stick with 4 long straight bows, looking for that deep circle sound into the string, and you just play 4, and then you have to decide out of the 4 which one was your favorite and why, and then try to make the other 3 as good as that one, and then dissecting it, looking at the beginnings of the sounds, which of the 4 was your favorite beginning sound, right? End of the sound, middle of the sound, putting that together. I think that, and then all of a sudden it's been 10-15 minutes and you're like, oh, how did that happen? But really, when you start to dissect things and really listen to all the little parts, actually sometimes I will just say, right, we're just going to do bow for today, even if they can play with the other hand, because it's brilliant. So I think, take the opportunity. If you can play with your right hand, enjoy it, because it's such a nice time to get into the real ergonomics of the instrument, the way that it works together. Yeah,
you don't need to wait for an injury to work on those things.
Exactly.
Now, if it was the left hand, of course we have those exercises we can do with plucking as well. So it would be just to start with, just plucking each string with the pinky, and making sure that it's all kind of moving together. It's not just the finger by itself. It's a motion that happens.
Beautiful motion.
Yes, and it's really good to keep the nice shape. So this can be done even at the beginning of a practice, just as a warm-up as well. And also that we have the strengthening of the fingers, right? So we can strengthen them by just doing just plucking with all the fingers. We can make a twinkle, for example, like that. Sorry, it's not easy. using all the fingers we have available. This is the hardest. And the idea is, it doesn't have to be perfect, it's just doing it, just creating that strength between your fingers.
Yeah, definitely. Really, really strong. Especially to pluck at that end of the violin as well, where it doesn't want to pluck, really, I think is amazing. I think some of the other things that I do away from the violin, and then you can do them on the violin, different finger patterns, I think is really important, especially because you have different, your tendons in between each finger need to stay alert. So, having the different finger patterns. And I think actually if you can think about the string that you're on and think what notes those would be chromatically as well, I think that sometimes really helps, thinking about, your witch's teeth. And I just do them on my hand sometimes. I just think about the different ways that we could be putting your fingers down, and then making sure that I'm still, just then I wanted to stick my finger 4 down really straight, even though, because that's a big stretch for me, but actually just practicing making sure that my fingers are on the tips. And I think, I would do that on the strings as well, just to keep them limber, which I think is really
fun. Yeah. And then also, if we are advanced enough to do vibrato and shifting, you can do all those exercises going all the way to the top and back. And also, when we're doing this, just checking how your back is. Like for example, right now, I am feeling my back because it's hurting still a bit. So just checking the muscles of the back are nice and soft when we do this. There's lots of vibrato exercises that we can do, so that will be a video for another time. But yeah, I think all those ideas could be very useful when we are not able to play. So.
And then of course, once you start, when you can start playing, make sure that you build up slowly, that you don't, immediately go, yeah, you've been given the go ahead, let's go do 2 hours of practice. To make up for all those weeks, if you need to do a lot because you have something coming up, say an exam or a recital or something that you were worried about getting, you can still do a lot in one day, but making sure that you break it into chunks. Put a timer on which actually physically stops you after 15 minutes, go and do something else, come back. It's really important to make sure that you rest enough in between. And if you only have a very short time, I believe that Guillaume's already done. I remember watching this brilliant video.
I'll put the link down
about so what to do if you only have a very short time to practice in. But yeah, I'm gonna keep working on that prevention. It was really brilliant to chat to you about this today.
Yeah, same. And thank you for all your tips, because you know it inside out, all the what can you do when you're not able to practice. So thank you for all your insights.
Thank you, because I really needed that refresher after so many years, and it's given me a lot of zhuzh to go and get my non-violin practice in today.
Good, well thank you very much.
Thank you.
And see you very soon, I hope.
I hope so, fingers crossed.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.